Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. I am your host Keith Crockford and today I am going to be talking about Machu Picchu and more importantly, what to pack if you're going to be trekking to Machu Picchu. Now, obviously there are various different routes to Machu Picchu and I'll sort of go a little bit on each one of those onto the episode. But this episode really came about from me chatting with Jake this morning because he's heading off in a couple of days with one of our bucket list trips to the Salkantay Trek. And we were just talking about how if you're in the UK at the minute, it's 30 degrees in lovely sunshine. And he said it's a little bit weird packing loads and loads of cold stuff. And he was packing his hat and his gloves, etc. And I kind of looked back through the podcast episodes and realized that I've done what to pack for Kilimanjaro, what to pack for Mount Toubkal, what to pack for Everest Base Camp, but we've never really looked at Machu Picchu as a what to pack guide. So I thought today on the podcast, I'd have a quick chat with you and just go through what I pack in a bag going to Machu Picchu. And it might be that you'll take something from this for other treks that you're doing as well. Obviously, it's not all Machu Picchu based, but you can switch out of your bag different bits and pieces for different trips. But today, I'm probably really talking about Machu Picchu and then what to pack for those trips. Now, we do 3 different trips to Machu Picchu. We do the Lares Trek, the standard Inca Trail trek, and also the Salkantay Trek. And to be honest, what you're going to pack is going to be the same for all of them. It's just that they're different length trips. So you're going to need slightly more stuff for the Salkantay than you would do over the Lares, for example. And depending on how you are doing your trip, also is going to be a little bit dependent on what you pack. But I'm going to be talking about it from a bucket list trip perspective, that you're just heading to Peru to go and do a trek to Machu Picchu. Now, when you arrive in Peru, you're going to land normally in Lima, and you're going to be spending some time in Lima before you go on your trek. And so our itineraries are around 11 to 13 days for our Machu Picchu treks. And actually, you're only going to be trekking for 3, 4, 5 of those days. So there's going to be plenty of other stuff that you're going to need to take for your trip as well. And that always, complicates things a little bit. So, for example, if you're going and doing a Kilimanjaro trek, you might have a day either side. If you're going to do an Everest Base Camp trek, you might have a couple of days either side. So the majority of the kit that you're going to be taking on that trip is your trekking kit. But obviously for this trip, as well as having the trek itself, there's also quite a lot of downtime, cultural time. So you'll need to have other bits and pieces as well. So on our trip, for example, you'll have 2 nights normally in Lima before you take your flight to Cusco. So you're going to need to have clothes to wander around Lima in. Lima is at sea level. It generally is relatively warm in Lima. So again, you're going to be going from different temperatures and altitudes. So that's why packing for Machu Picchu is a little bit more difficult. Then you're going to head to Cusco. Now, Cusco is at 3,300 meters. You can have lovely sunny days, but the evenings generally get very cold because of the altitude. If I just look at the weather at the minute in Cusco, for example, you're talking about 22 degrees during the day is a maximum temperature, which is quite nice to wander around in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. But then it drops down to 2-3 degrees in the evenings. And it gets dark quite early. So generally by sort of 5-6 o'clock, it's getting a lot colder. So as you're wandering around for your evening meal, you then need to think about, again, what you're wearing. As soon as that sun goes down, it gets really cold. And that obviously then follows you once you then start your trek. So generally for like our trip, for example, we'll spend 3 days in Cusco acclimatizing before we head out on the trek. So again, when you're thinking about your packing, you're going to need 3 days worth of clothes for wandering around Cusco, for going and seeing the sights. Generally you're going to be doing a fair amount of walking when you're doing those visits. So you are still going to be wearing the trekking gear potentially that you're going to be wearing when you go on to the trek. Once you get onto the trek for Machu Picchu, obviously you're going to have an awful lot of kit that you're going to need to leave behind in the hotel. You're not going to take everything with you. You're only going to take what you need for your trek itself. So you kind of need to think about that from a baggage perspective of how you're going to leave stuff in the hotel. When you book a trip with the bucket list company, for example, you will get provided a duffel bag to pack your trek things in, which then allows you to leave your bag at the hotel. Obviously, not all companies do that, so you need to think about what you're going to do. But for us, you can leave everything in the hotel in the bag you took it in, and then you can then pack your trek stuff into the duffel bag that we're going to provide you for the trek itself. Now, weight limits on the trek are not that large for a Machu Picchu Inca Trail trek. So you're generally limited to about 7 kilos of stuff to go on the trek with you. That's what's going to get carried. Obviously, you can have other things in your day pack that you are going to carry. So you need to think about, what am I going to take? And as I always say to people, the biggest, heaviest thing in your bag is going to probably be the sleeping bag that you take with you. My sleeping bag, for example, is about 600 grams. I've seen some people with sleeping bags of 2.5 kilos. Now, obviously, I can then take a lot more stuff in my bag if my sleeping bag is a whole lot lighter. So things you're going to need to take with you on your trek then, obviously, like I said, 1 is a sleeping bag. 2, it depends on, we provide mats in the tents on our trips, but some people who really want a comfy night's sleep might take their own sleeping mat with them as well. I think the ones that are provided are perfectly fine. But then again, I'm used to sleeping in a tent. If you're not used to sleeping in a tent, then you might want to think about maybe taking a slightly thicker roll mat so you have a comfier night's sleep. Obviously a pillow if you want to, or as a lot of people do, they'll just use their sleeping bag stuff sack, throw their down jacket in there, and then that will be their pillow in the evening. Other things you need on the trip then are going to be a head torch. Obviously you are camping. If you need to find your way to the toilet in the evening, you're going to need to be able to see where to go, and likewise sorting things out in your tents and things like that. So you're going to need to have a head torch with you. Trekking clothes wise, again, on a Machu Picchu trek, as we were talking about Cusco and the differences in temperatures, you could be walking in shorts and t-shirt during the day, but as soon as that sun goes down, it is going to get very, very cold in the evenings. So you need to pack for all eventualities. And obviously, again, as we're in the mountains, the weather will change very, very quickly. So a good layering system is always super important. So for me, on a Machu Picchu trek, I would have a pair of shorts. I would have some lightweight wicking t-shirts. I would have a fleece. I'd have my down jacket. I'd have my waterproof. On my bottom half, then, I would have my shorts. I'd have a couple of pairs of trousers, and then I'd have my waterproof trousers as well. And I can just layer up or take off to make sure I was then at the right temperature. Obviously, sun hat would be super important. Sunglasses would be super important. But at the same time, a warm hat and gloves are also needed as well, especially if you're going over the high passes, because that's when you are going to really feel the cold. When you get to the altitudes excuse me, when you get to the altitudes of like 4,400 meters on the Lares Trek, you'll do 4,200 meters on the Inca Trail, and you'll do 4,600 meters as a maximum altitude when you go on to the Salkantay Trek. So up at those altitudes where you're going over the passes, it's going to feel quite cold. And obviously the wind can come up as well. So just make sure you've got lots of layers with you. And then think about, obviously, things like your waterproofs are going to be carried in your day pack, just so you can access them if you need to. On the Salkantay Trek and the Lares Trek, generally your kit will be carried by horses, and muleteers will take your things. When you're on the Inca Trail, it will be porters that are carrying your bags. Now, they're a lot stricter on the Inca Trail to the baggage limits because everything gets weighed in and everything gets weighed out. So they're a lot stricter on the Inca Trail than they maybe are on the other two. You might get away with just being a little bit over on the other two, but you certainly won't get away with being over the limit on the Inca Trail itself. So just bear that one in mind. What else would you have with you on a Machu Picchu trek then? Is you would have things like your sun cream, your wash bag. Those are going to be super important. You'd have toilet roll. I would take a battery pack with me so I could charge. There's going to be no way of you charging any of your phones or devices up. So you need to think about how you're going to charge those in the evening. And obviously battery packs can be quite heavy. So just think about how you're going to pack that. The chances are you're probably going to be carrying that in your day pack. You get fed super well on a Machu Picchu trek. I think it's probably out of all of the treks we do, the food on a Machu Picchu trek is absolutely amazing. 3 courses, you get looked after so well, but obviously you might want to supplement that with some snacks as well, and you're going to have to carry those. On the Inca Trail, there is the opportunity when you get into camps in the evenings. There are some people selling bits and pieces. And on the Lares Trek, there's a chance of stocking up either at the start or at the end or towards the end, depending whether or not you're starting or you're finishing in Lares itself. But generally, you'll stock up before you go on the trek to make sure that you have everything that you need. For me, I think you need a good pair of ankle supporting boots for trekking to Machu Picchu. I think there is so many opportunities to turn your ankle. There's lots of steps, especially on the Inca Trail, where I think if having that extra ankle support is really, really a wise idea. I wear a mid-height boot, so it's not a full walking boot. It's more of an approach shoe with a bit more ankle support. It doesn't come all the way up. They're quite light, and I think they're best for this sort of trip. They're Gore-Tex, they're waterproof, but they would be what I would recommend for a Machu Picchu trek. I think a heavy walking boot is probably a little bit overkill, but then at the same time, an approach trekking style shoe, I don't think offers the ankle support that you probably need for it, just in case you do roll over on your ankle. Trekking poles are a must, I think, on a Machu Picchu trek. There are, like I say, so many steps, especially on the Inca Trail, that having the extra support with the trekking poles, especially coming down the steps, really does take that pressure off your knees. But if you're on the Inca Trail, you do need to make sure that you've got the rubber bungs on the ends of your trekking poles, because you're not allowed to have just the carbon bits to protect the Inca Trail itself. They don't want everyone hitting it with the carbon piece on the end of a trekking pole. So you do need to make sure that you've got the rubber bungs on the end so you're not damaging the Inca Trail itself. So that would pretty much be what I would be taking in my bag. Obviously, first aid kit as well, so I could look after myself. Plasters, rehydration sachets, Imodium, basic pain relief, so paracetamol, ibuprofen, and obviously any other medication that you're then going to be taking. You need to make sure you've got access to that, and you'd really want to be keeping that in your day pack as well. Obviously, you also want to think about how you're going to protect your day pack. So whether you've got a waterproof cover over the top of it, or whether you're going to pack everything in dry bags into your day pack to make sure that nothing, your camera or anything else you're carrying. And you'll need to have your passport with you as well. So obviously make sure that stays nice and dry. And I would certainly be packing the stuff that's going in my duffel bag into dry bags as well, just to make sure that if it did rain, that, that they'll try and keep it as dry as possible, but obviously water can get everywhere. But the last thing you want is to go, get into camp that evening and find that water's got into your duffel bag and you've got a wet sleeping bag or wet clean clothes to put on. So make sure everything is in dry bags, into your duffel bag, in your day pack. And then then that if it does rain, if everything does get wet, you can still your stuff in your bag is going to be dry. The other thing that people do is, because it can be warm during the day, a lot of people will buy ponchos when they're in Cusco. Just basic ponchos that will just go over the top. You can put, if it starts to rain, you can quickly throw it over you. It can go over your day pack as well, and it just keeps everything dry rather than having to put a waterproof on. So it's only going to be a quick shower and it's really hot and you don't necessarily want to be walking in your waterproofs. It might be that you just buy one of these ponchos that go over the top. Obviously, water is super important. You're going to need to be carrying that in your day pack. So you're going to need some way of carrying water, whether that's a filtered water bottle, whether that's a Camelback. That's going to sit in your rucksack. Personally, for me, I prefer a filtered water bottle. And then you can top those up. They'll boil water, breakfast, lunch and dinner. You can refill it. So you haven't got to carry a full day's water when you stop for lunch. And generally you'll be stopping for a cooked lunch. So, like I said, you're going to be fed very, very well. But you will have the opportunity to top your water up at, like I say, breakfast, lunch, dinner, at camp, whatever. So you haven't got to worry about water at all. But likewise, if you've got a filtered water bottle and you're walking past a stream and you want to top it up, then you haven't got to wait and you can have cold water from a stream and it's perfect. So for me, I'd always opt for the filtered water bottle rather than a Camelback in my bag. So generally I'll have 2 filtered water bottles with me, 750. So I've got 1.5 liters of water that I know if I need to top it up, I can do, or I can get through to lunch and get it refilled, whatever. Now, depending on which trek you're doing will depend on how you're going to see Machu Picchu. It's one reason why I love the Lares Trek and I love the Salkantay Trek, because you get to spend the night before you go to Machu Picchu in a hotel in Aguas Calientes. And then you'll get the bus up to explore Machu Picchu the following day. And for me, I really love that. I love the fact that I've done the trek, and then the Machu Picchu in going and discovering Machu Picchu is almost like a separate part of the trip. I think when you do the Inca Trail, you come through the Sun Gate in the morning, you walk down into Machu Picchu, you come out of Machu Picchu, you drop your bag off, and then you need to put your bag into a locker, which you need to pay for. And then you're going to go back into Machu Picchu to do your exploring bit. But you're going to be in the clothes that you've been trekking in. And I just kind of quite like the idea that I've got up, I've had a shower, and I've gone and explored Machu Picchu without having to have all my bags with me and my trekking kit and everything else. I kind of like that bit. But I do get why people like to do the Inca Trail, because it is the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, and you walk through the Sun Gate and you get to see it and you walk down. Like, I completely get that. And having done all of them, I'll just say that I do prefer the hotel the night before then going and exploring Machu Picchu. So obviously, if you are on the Salkantay Trek or the Lares Trek, when you're thinking about your packing, you're then thinking about, well, actually, what am I going to wear into Machu Picchu? You've got the opportunity not to have to wear your trekking clothes that you've been wearing for 3 days. It might be that, you've got a comfortable pair of shoes rather than walking around Machu Picchu in your boots. So you can also think about it from that perspective as well when you're doing your packing. Once you've finished in Machu Picchu, you'll then spend some time in Aguas Calientes. You'll have some time to have lunch before you then get the train back then to Cusco, which is about a 4-hour ride back to Cusco to be reunited with your bag and everything else that you've left behind, and all the clean clothes that you haven't had to drag through on the trip with you. So again, that's a really nice way of finishing the trip off, that you haven't got to have everything with you. For most of our people, the day after we finished Machu Picchu, we then offer the Rainbow Mountain option, which is a day's excursion to go and visit Rainbow Mountain. It's definitely one that I think everyone should do. Obviously, a lot of people are still tired from the Machu Picchu. It's an early start to go to Rainbow Mountain, but you have got the opportunity to, you've got to get up early, but then it's a bit of a drive to get to Rainbow Mountain. So you've got time to kind of catch up on your sleep a little bit there. And then likewise, you can sleep on your way back as well. So that's great. But obviously you are going to need trekking kit again to go to Rainbow Mountain. So again, Rainbow Mountain sits at 5,000 meters plus, so it is going to be cold up there. But again, if it during the day and the sun's out, it could be a bit of both. So you've got to, again, be prepared that you could have both extremities there, really. If it's windy, it could be really cold. If the sun's out, it might be that you're trekking up in a T-shirt again and just having to put an extra layer on when you actually get up to the top to have your photos taken. So you're going to need to have some stuff for that as well. But obviously, you can have clean stuff in your bag in Cusco that you then go and do Rainbow Mountain with the next day. And obviously, quite a lot of people from our trips are now adding the Amazon extension or the Galapagos. So you're going to think about, actually, I'm going to need more things that I'm going to need to leave at the hotel for those as well. But in terms of what you need for Machu Picchu, I would say for the trek, it's not a great deal of stuff. Like I say, you're trekking for, Lares Trek is 3 days. Inca Trail is 3 days, with the 4th day being going into Machu Picchu. And then the Salkantay Trek is 4 days, with the 5th day being Machu Picchu. So you don't need a great amount of stuff. Like I said, as long as you've got a great layering system, that should be enough. You can easily get it in with the 7K allowance. Like I say, as long as the sleeping bag isn't too big and bulky. Because if you think how much extra clothes you can take for 2 kilos, if you've got a lighter sleeping bag, then that makes all the difference. We've done kit packing videos for them on YouTube. I will put notes to those kit packing videos so you can actually see what we're packing into the bags. If you want to actually see the individual items going in. And that they're super interesting to watch. You can kind of get a grip of how and what to pack and how to pack it. So if you are heading to Machu Picchu or you are doing another trek and you're just interested, then please click the link in the show notes, and then that will take you through to those videos. Hopefully you've got a trip to Machu Picchu booked, but if you're just in the inquiry stage, then please do check out our trips to Machu Picchu. Like I say, 3 different ones. They're very, very different. So just have a look at what the different routes have to offer to see which one would best suit you, because they are different for different people. So make sure you get the one that's right for you. And of course, if you need to speak to one of the team, we'd be more than happy to kind of advise you on which trek we think would suit you the best if you want to head to Machu Picchu. But that kind of brings this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast to a close today. I just wanted to quickly go through what kit you needed to have for Machu Picchu, and I think I've ticked that one off. But if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us. And just before I finish, I just really would like some more like 5-star reviews of the podcast. So if you have got the time when this podcast finished, just to go and click like you like this podcast, because it really does help it and get it out to more and more people so they can be educated in the world of adventure travel. But if you could do that, that would be amazing. And I'll be back next week for another episode. But until then, thanks ever so much for listening. Have a great week, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.